This happened decades ago, but to this day, my heart will still race in the retelling of this story. I was 23 years old and had just moved to a small new city in southwestern Ontario with my then husband of 3 years. We'd moved there because he had landed a job. I began walking everywhere to apply for work and soon got into a routine of walking at least a couple of miles a day because it felt good. My appearance was always neat and modest when I went out, partly because I knew that I might meet a potential employer. I wanted to look professional. But besides that, I was never a flashy or provocative dresser anyway. One day I was walking home from a shopping mall that was located near the edge of town and along a busy 4-lane road, a few miles from our apartment. I'd done this a lot. As I was walking on the sidewalk facing oncoming traffic, a white pickup truck pulled over to the curb right beside me. The passenger window was rolled down, not unusual as it was a hot summer day, and the driver leaned over and called on me in a low, mumbling voice. I knew better than to get too close, but considered that he might be asking for directions, so I just stopped where I was and responded with, "Pardon me?" As I hadn't really understood what he said. He then said, "Get in, I'll give you a ride." He appeared dirty. His hair hung stringy and oily from beneath a baseball cap and fell just below his shoulders. He sounded as though he was stoned or drunk, but still I was polite and said, "No thank you, I'm enjoying the walk," to which he muttered an obscenity and roared off. I shrugged it off and continued on my way. Then, only a few minutes later, as I was approaching a side street that intersected with this main road, I saw the truck coming back towards me again. But this time, he had 2 other guys with him. My heart was racing wildly by the time he attempted to cut me off, turning the truck onto the side street right in front of me. Then in a split second, the 2 guys jumped out. Without even thinking or waiting to see which way they were going, I immediately turned to my right into the busy road, and bolted across 4 lanes. Miraculously, I wasn't hit by a car, and I just kept on running, not once thinking that I could have been hit. I continued running after getting across the road, all the while looking over my shoulder. I then started thinking of what I was going to do if they came back around for me again. It was broad daylight. Surely somebody must have seen something. Just as I was trying to decide if I was going to go up to a stranger's house and ask for help, 2 women pulled up to the curb in the same direction I'd been running and told me that they had seen what happened. Without hesitation, I hopped in and started trembling. They offered to take me to the police station, but all I could say was that I wanted to go home. They offered to stay with me until my husband got home from work, but I wasn't thinking clearly. I only wanted to get inside as quickly as possible, lock the doors, pull the curtains closed, and wait for my husband. So they left. Which in hindsight, I realized later was probably a mistake. My husband arrived home not long after and I fell apart, barely able to get out what had happened to me. He took me to the local police station to report what had happened, but as I didn't get a license plate number, there wasn't much to go on, beyond me telling them that there was a white pickup truck and the description of the driver. The officer said, "Do you know how many white pickup trucks are out there?" I felt sick. After that, I stopped walking anywhere alone. Even when I was out with my husband, I was constantly looking over my shoulder. Shortly after this incident happened, we moved outside the city to a rural address. We had a long driveway with one of those rural mailboxes at the end of the road. Most days I couldn't bring myself to walk the length of the driveway to get the mail, even though I knew logically there was no way that guy could have known where I lived or where we moved. If my husband was working at night, I'd tape newspaper over the windows so that nobody could see in. It sounds crazy, I know, but I realize now that it was the fallout of being traumatized by thoughts of what happened and what might have happened had I not run into traffic. It's taken me years to get over this, and sometimes the residual fear still comes creeping back. Just nothing like it was. In the city I lived in, we had a small college. Well, it was small at the time. Every summer, they offer day camps for parents to send the kids to, so they're not sitting at home alone for the entire summer. They cover science, cooking, arts and crafts, sports, just about anything and everything. With both of my parents working, I was used to using the local transit to get myself home every day. One afternoon, I missed the bus by a matter of minutes, so I decided to attempt to walk home. I thought, it can't be that far. Well, it turned out to be a lot longer than I anticipated. Part of that route at the time, before years of road work and construction, it went through a small industrial section that wasn't far from downtown. I knew it well because the car wash my dad always used was nearby. As I was passing one of the many businesses, a black pickup truck slowed down and stopped beside me. The driver said, "Aren't you a little young to be walking by yourself in this area?" Unsure of what to do, I fibbed and said my dad worked nearby and I was supposed to meet him for a lift home. He claimed he knew my dad and offered me a ride. It was at this point that I knew I had to find a way to get away because I knew probably 90% of the guys my dad worked with, and this man was not one of them. I started walking slowly backwards and told him I didn't have much farther to go and that it would be okay. He said, "Suit yourself," and drove off. I let out a huge sigh of relief, thinking that was the end of it. I started back on my trek. Not even 2 minutes later, I got an eerie feeling and looked over my shoulder. Sure enough, he had turned his truck around and was heading back towards my location. Not wanting to alert him that I had seen him, I quickened my pace and headed for the nearest business that I thought might be open, the CP truck yards. As casually as I could, I walked up the steps and tried the door. It was locked. They were already closed for the day. I took a moment to gather my thoughts and to figure something out quick. I peered around the corner of the building. I saw that there were several trailers backed up to the bay doors. I scrambled down the side of the stairs and squeezed in behind the ends of the trailers. It was then I heard the black truck enter the lot. I ducked down, crawled under one of the trailers, tucking myself in behind a tire. It seemed like eternity as I watched the truck drive by the trailer, slowing down when it reached the gap in between the trailers. I didn't budge, not an inch. I silently prayed that he would give up and leave. He must have gotten fed up because next thing I know, the tires are spitting gravel and sand everywhere as he guns the engine and roars out of the parking lot. I swear I didn't move for almost another 10 minutes because I wanted to be sure he was gone. I crawled under the trailers, keeping out of sight just in case he'd stuck around. As soon as I saw it was all clear, I ran all the way to the car wash as fast as I could. The lady at the counter, I think her name was Brenda, she recognized me and seeing the fear in my eyes, asked what was wrong. It was all I could do to not start crying as I asked her if I could use the phone to call one of my parents. She brought me into a small office, and while I was calling my mom, she brought me a bag of chips and a Coke from the vending machine out front. Having been pulled out of work, Mom was not happy with me at all, but once we got in the car, she could sense that something was wrong. She took me home, made me a PB&J sandwich, and cuddled with me on the couch. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Everything that had happened kept going through my head. Dad was still up, so I went out to join him on the couch and watch TV. I snuggled close to him, so close that he said, "You're shaking like a leaf. What's wrong?" It all came out at once. Missing the bus, the black truck, hiding under the trailers, all of it. By the time I was done, I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. He pulled me into his lap and held me as I cried. He rocked me gently, rubbing my back, trying to calm me down. He then took me by my shoulders, looked me directly in the eyes. No more walking home, okay? Okay, I'll just wait for the next bus from now on. I stayed snuggled and just sat there while he watched the sports highlights. I woke up the next morning in my bed because he always carried me to bed when I fell asleep on the couch. This time was no different. A week or so later, he and I were at the car wash. I'd gone into the office to get Dad some quarters and a pop. I was on my way back out the door when I saw the truck pulling into the wash bay. I froze. Brenda was behind the counter and came to see why I was blocking the doorway. She saw what I was looking at and quickly put two and two together somehow. She prodded me towards the bay where my dad was. Dad needs those quarters, so get going. I practically ran back to the car, threw the quarters in the back seat, and ducked down in the back. I was terrified he would find me. My dad opened the back door, took my hand, and pulled me out. "I'm here. No one is going to hurt you," he said. He then put me in the front seat and finished washing the car. As we were leaving, we could see Brenda talking to the guy. Then he left. It's been 36 years since that incident. I never saw him again. It's a scary thing for a 10-year-old to go through. No one else ever found out about what happened. I kept it a closely guarded secret for a long time, but the only way to get past something like this is to deal with it head on. So, thanks for listening.